So this week in cryptocurrency news has brought a lot of exciting developments. It's been pretty big. Kind of right out of the gate, we've got the SEC rejecting yet another Bitcoin ETF, but that isn't necessarily all bad news. There's been a lot of progress on that front. Dave's going to talk about that a little bit. And then in the second half, we're going to be covering the IRS issuing what a lot of people thought would be good news and how that might have ended up being a little bit more bad news from the IRS. So we're joined, of course, once again by Dave Zeiler, Money Morning's cryptocurrency expert. Thanks for being here, Dave.
I'm always glad to be here.
So let's start with the SEC. They rejected another Bitcoin ETF. What happened this time, and why is it not necessarily just more bad news?
Well, yeah, they rejected one more. This is not unusual. They've rejected all of the ETFs for the past 6 years that this has been going on, and it's always for the same reasons. They're concerned that there's not enough oversight in the foreign exchanges because Bitcoin is traded all over the world. It's traded 24/7. They're also worried about price manipulation, that there's not enough controls and oversight and regulation to prevent that from happening. And these come up time and time again in these rejection statements. This last one was 112 pages long, so they go into exhaustive detail about this stuff. But as we saw, it really wasn't a big deal for the Bitcoin markets because this has happened so many times. No one is expecting them to approve any of these ETF proposals at the moment. So it created kind of a little blip. It was a very brief, maybe 1% loss, and they came back up. And if you look at the Bitcoin chart, you wouldn't even know anything like this had happened because with the volatility of Bitcoin, it looked like a normal day. So now you say, like, what next? You know, what is this going to mean from here? And we're going to continue to see these ETF proposals because, as one of these guys pointed out, the guy, the Bitwise, this particular proposal was done by Bitwise, and he was on CNBC, and he noted that there's a lot of progress has been made over the past couple of years. That's why these guys keep putting these proposals out there, because we are making progress from the total Wild West we had back in 2013 and 14 to where we are now. And he said, now 6 of 10 of the biggest Bitcoin exchanges are regulated, where they weren't a couple of years ago. Now we have $200 million a day of Bitcoin futures trading. We didn't have that a couple of years ago. We have more custodianship. We have big names involved. We have Fidelity. We have Lloyd's of London, as well as Coinbase, that are doing the custodianship of Bitcoin. None of these things were around a couple of years ago. That's why they were somewhat optimistic they might get approval, even though it didn't happen. The SEC's still not enough. But the way I see it, we've made this much progress over the past couple of years. We're going to make, hopefully, just as much progress over the next couple of years. So the odds of the SEC approving a Bitcoin ETF proposal keep going up as we go forward. The next one, there's another proposal that's still out there. Its deadline is in February. It's only 5 months away. I don't think that one will get approved either. It's too soon. But when you go out a year, the odds are a little higher. 2 years, even higher than that. And I think that's how long it's going to take before we see one. But I do think we will see one.
Kind of switching from the good news looking forward with an ETF, the IRS has finally issued new guidance on cryptocurrencies and how they plan to tax them. But it's not what people were expecting. So what went down there?
No, that was, they promised it. That's actually been 5 years since the last time the IRS put out any kind of guidance on taxing of cryptocurrencies. And then in May, they said, well, guess what, folks? We're working on some more guidance. We're going to give it to you this year. Finally, this week, it came out. And everybody was like, we waited for this. This is terrible. It really doesn't give a whole lot of information. The best thing about it is it kind of clarifies what your basis is, which basically is whatever you paid for it, which is kind of common sense. It's true of any commodity or any capital gain situation. But this is the document here. It's only 5 pages long, and it mostly just talks about hard forks and airdrops, which is a very specific kind of thing. A lot of times in crypto, somebody wants to create a new version of it. It creates a hard fork. So now you have the original version plus this new version. But it seems that the IRS is very confused. They don't seem to understand what hard forks and airdrops are. They're confusing the two. Everybody who's looked at this, who understands cryptocurrency, is like, these guys clearly don't know what they're talking about. the IRS didn't even take into account the situation where if you own your own cryptocurrency, as opposed to holding it in an exchange. They only seem to deal with that one very specific situation. So basically, this guidance has raised more questions than answers. And there's several things that it left out, which people were hoping they were going to talk about. One is the taxation event if you have a crypto to crypto sale. France last month said that if you are trading crypto, that would not create a taxable event. People hope maybe the IRS would see that and also do it, but no, they didn't mention it. As far as things stand now, a crypto to crypto trade is still a taxable event here in the US. And the other thing they didn't mention was the de minimis exception, which would mean if you're using crypto to spend, you're spending it to buy something, to purchase a good or service. With foreign exchange, if you go to a foreign country and you acquire some of that currency, you can use up to like $600 of it, and it's not taxable, even though you have bought and sold a foreign currency. Otherwise, foreign exchange is taxable. They didn't talk about that either. There's a bill in Congress that would create a de minimis exception for cryptocurrencies that hasn't gone anywhere yet. And the IRS didn't talk about that either. So it was a pretty big disappointment all the way around.
Well, thank you so much for kind of giving some shedding some light again on the SEC and IRS news. We'll catch you next week.
Good to be here.